My name is Taylor Pearce, and I'm Senior Economist at OMFIF. It's a pleasure for me to be moderating our ESG panel today. So I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. László, Fazekas, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of MVM, the Hungarian energy company. We have Ferenc Kementzey, sorry about that, Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Head of Corporates, Markets, and Investment Banking at Raiffeisen Bank, Hungary. We also have Tomomitsu Maruta, Sustainable Finance Associate Officer at the European Investment Bank, David Papp from the MNB, who is Head of Sustainable Finance Policy, and Anastasia Petraki, Head of Sustainability for Germany, Austria, Germanspeaking Switzerland, I believe, and Eastern Europe at BlackRock. So thank you very much for joining us today. We've already heard on the previous panels about the importance of facilitating the green transition of the real economy, as well as the how finance can help drive this, the issuance of GSS and labeled bonds, and some of the risks that come with these new challenges and instruments seeking to address them. I'm delighted to be joined today by representatives from both the public and private sector, as well as from the financial sector and the real economy, as I think these are all important voices in discussions as we talk about the sustainable transition. I'd like to start by talking about ESG standards and international cooperation. And first, I'll come to you, Tomomitsu. As the EU bank, how has the EIB been contributing to the development and implementation of EU and international standards in sustainable finance?
Thank you very much for the question. So first of all, why do we need standards? Well, in 2016, there has been a report, the Green Finance Synthesis Report by the G20, that was identifying as a core challenge for green finance and sustainable finance as a whole, the lack of clarity as to what can be defined, what kind of economic activities can be defined as green. This is a challenge, this is an obstacle, both for investors, but also for issuers of green bonds. What has been the experience of the EIB? How have we contributed to the development and the implementation of the standard, the response to this challenge? We have heard of the intervention of the Commission of DG FISMA in the previous panel, and I would like to stress that in the context of the G20 observation of the lack of clarity in sustainable finance, the EU has taken bold steps in a reform of the Capital Markets Union to facilitate sustainable investment in the Union. The key legislation, the key standard in this area is the regulation to establish the framework to facilitate sustainable investment, the so-called taxonomy regulation. This is the core pillar that provides clarity as to what green finance activities are, or to be more precise, the economic activities that contribute substantially to environmental objectives. This is on the EU side, and this is also a core pillar for international cooperation within the context, for example, of the International Platform on Sustainable Finance, where you have the development of a comparison of different taxonomies. You have, for example, a report on the Common Ground Taxonomy that compares the EU taxonomy with its equivalent on the Chinese side. So, for the development and the emergence of the EU taxonomy, the EIB, the Capital Markets Department, with the help of its in-house expertise in project evaluation, has contributed to the first proposal of a taxonomy in 2017. And for this, comparability and interoperability of markets has been core. There has been a white paper on the need for a common language in green finance that was published jointly by the European Investment Bank and by the China Green Finance Committee under the aegis of People's Bank of China. So then there have been more work, more technical expert groups by the Commission, and this has led to the final adoption of the EU taxonomy regulation to delegated act for the various environmental objectives. And on our side, given the Climate Bank roadmap of November 2020, the EIB has decided to become even more the EU Climate Bank. And in this context, the tracking methodology for green finance of the EIB, which should reach at least 50% of new lending by 2025. So this green tracking of the green finance methodology tracking should be progressively aligned with the EU taxonomy, and to the capital markets with the issuance of our green bonds and sustainability bonds, we are reflecting this gradual process of implementation via the eligibilities of the projects that we can allocate with these bonds, and all of this in an auditable manner.
Great,
Thank
you. We'll come back shortly to some more specific examples of the investment cases of the EIB. But first, I want to come to David. Can you provide some insight on how the sustainable transition is progressing in the Hungarian economy from the MNB's perspective?
And thank you very much for the question. I think it's absolutely crucial to talk about that. And I mean, the first question was about standards. That also, I think, is vital because that creates, I call the plumbing for the ecosystem for sustainable investment. Taking a step back, okay, so just looking at, okay, where we stand in the country, but it could be probably also valid for the region, what I'm saying. So talking about the sustainable transition, I would define that as decarbonization of the economy, because sustainable transition can mean a lot of things now. We don't only have climate change, but we have also the biodiversity reduction as an environmental issue. We have pollution and everything else. So we're just talking about decarbonization here. And I think that's, if you agree on that, that language, now please understand what I'm saying in that context. So where we stand. So looking at the Hungarian economy, I think we can say that we have some good news and some bad news. So from the base year of 1990, we like to use the base year, the Hungarian economy decarbonized by 33 percentage points, which is, I think, a substantial number. I think in the first or second panel, there was a remark about, okay, was this a low-hanging fruit or not? I would like to maybe kind of shed light on an additional figure that from 2005, the Hungarian economy decarbonized 17%, sorry, just not to be mistaken. So certainly it's not only kind of like the low-hanging fruits that happened after 1990, after the economic transition from the planned economy to the market economy. Something is going on, modernization of the economy is seemingly decoupled from emissions. So there is a good trend that we have observed in this past, let's say, 23, 30 years. It's a bit of bad news that in the past 5 years, this trend has slowed, and then we reached a plateau. Carbon emissions have not been reduced substantially. I mean, we have also seen rapid economic growth, so certainly we could not decouple in such a meaningful way that economic growth happened and the carbon reduction continued further. So we reached a plateau. I think it's a very big challenge of how we're going to continue the decarbonization. I think there's a huge potential still in the economy, and I would like to highlight maybe three things, three messages that is very much related to this. We have seen some positive developments in Hungary in the real economy. I think solar power installation has been a major success. Based on the production figures, I think we have reached really good penetration of solar power. It's absolutely vital that this continues, but there are technical challenges. So some good developments in the real economy. Some bad news, though. All these developments are due to more on non-market-based instruments. So I'm talking about standards regulation, which is partly coming from the European Union. It's absolutely vital and it's very important, and it has played a great role. What is not really strong, I think, here locally is the market-based, the market signals for the decarbonization. I'm talking about prices. For example, household energy consumption is really high. Also comparing it to other countries in the region and in Europe, there's certainly a price signal issue there. Energy prices are capped, so we should think about policies of how to incentivize the players of the economy internalize kind of like decarbonization. And we have a huge potential. I mean, see, in the past year, for example, household energy consumption decreased, but it could have decreased more if there could be more incentives for the households to save. So we'd like to see, I think, for further decarbonization, more market-based instruments next to regulation standards, so more effective carbon pricing. Okay, maybe we can talk about taxation, etc., etc. So I think that's a big challenge that we're facing. Third one is there is a huge investment need. So if we want to transform the economy to a net zero economy, I mean, there are some estimation done by the Hungarian government and also from McKinsey, the consulting firm. We're talking about the region from 60 to 200 billion euros, so a multiple of the annual output of the Hungarian economy that needs to be invested for decarbonization to reach net zero economy. And yeah, that's a huge number. That's a huge number everywhere. But I would like to contrast that with what the figures we have seen, talking about the financial sector, that are aligned with decarbonization. So what percentage points of bank loans, investment funds are really channeled into towards decarbonization. And sadly, we are not seeing very high figures. So we're seeing figures lower than 5%. Of course, it's a transparency and data issue. Can be the real figure we cannot really know because statistics are not available for all economic activity that are related to decarbonization. But the numbers that we know about are in the very low percentage point region. 1%, 2%, and 5% of the banking system is currently financing this decarbonization. So there is a long way to go. And now the question is, okay, how that can be accelerated? And yeah, for that we need these standards, of course, but not only that, I mentioned also this market-based instrument. So maybe I stop here,
yes,
and then we can continue further.
Thank you for a very comprehensive overview of the decarbonization agenda in Hungary. You mentioned private markets, so maybe, Ferenc, I'll come to you next. What do you see as the role of private sector banks in facilitating the green agenda, and what are the challenges and limitations that you face?
First of all, what I would say here that the banking industry has an immense responsibility in this green transition overall. So this is very important. We stand between the regulator and the real market participants, companies. So our role is crucial here. On the one hand, we would like to enable new actors to enter the market with innovative climate solutions, like solar in Hungary, for instance, is a good example. On the other hand, to help to modernize also the old market participants. And the basic role of the banks here is to channel capital into investments, I would say, that then really have a positive impact on the environment here, and to help the clients to rather go to the circular economy than to the linear and so on. So there are many initiatives. And how we do this? So we basically are incentivizing here green loans, based on the European Union taxonomy alignment on the one hand, and on the other hand, on our own green bond principles, of course, which is then as well aligned with the international capital market standards here. And this we do. At the same time, we are also, I would say, we cherish the National Bank program here, the preferential capital requirement. This is a very important point. I think Hungary is a pioneer here, giving 7% EU taxonomy aligned or 5% practically capital relief measured on the asset amount, which is then reducing the Pillar 2 capital requirement and the SREP ratio. I think this is a very important step here. And because in commercial banks there is a RORAC, return on risk-adjusted capital-based steering, this goes directly into some client conditions, and for that we can then provide really green loans or organized green bonds much cheaper than otherwise. I would of course say maybe this incentive is maybe not enough, as we still do not see very high volumes, but I would say this is a major step here. There are a lot of challenges, and maybe also that's the reason why the progress despite of this incentive, is not so quick. So the one challenge is always the availability of the data, as there are many customers. So how to organize here the green certificate? This is not easy. And the clients do not know how to proceed. So I think this is a difficulty here. The incentives could be more, I think, and also broader, maybe not just the capital. We would need much more incentivized funding also from European institutions here, as there is a funding issue in Hungary, clearly. We have now high rates everywhere. Hungary has a high country risk comparatively. So we need as well a more preferred funding, I would say. And thirdly, and foremost, we need more education. So I would say we are educating our internal staff, our clients. What does that mean? How they can use the green framework? But I would say overall we would need much more education. Maybe nobody should graduate from a business school not understanding the green framework and how to transform and how to use it in a financing and company management. So I would say, I would propose here also on a regulatory basis to insist on more education everywhere in the economy. So these are the main challenges, limitations from my perspective.
Data, incentives, funding, and education could all be better from your perspective.
Yes.
Thank you. Anastasia, I'll come to you now. Same question. What do you see as the role of, as an asset management firm? What are the challenges and limitations you face as well, and how are you working to help facilitate the green agenda?
Thank you. First of all, the role of asset managers here is that of a fiduciary. We are not a bank, and the money that we manage is not our own, it belongs to our clients. So what is our role here in the context of the green finance agenda? We follow the same three principles that we follow overall in terms of how we manage money on behalf of clients. First, we start with the client. What are their objectives? What are they trying to achieve? And then our job here is to make sure that we offer an appropriate platform of sustainable and transition investing products and solutions. The second principle is performance. So our job is to maximize risk-adjusted returns within the mandates that clients give us. And here, of course, consideration of sustainability factors comes into play because we need to consider them when they are financially material, even if we do not manage a product with an explicit sustainability focus. And the third principle we follow is base everything on research, data, and analytics. So, for example, for the transition, it is our job to understand how is the transition likely to unfold, what are the investment implications for our clients, and it is also our job to make sure that we offer clients the data and analytics that they need to also understand this and the impact that it will have on their portfolios. Now, on the challenges, I would probably add on top of what has already been mentioned, the sheer complexity of this, and I say this, I'm mindful I'm representing now the largest asset manager. The second thing is there is still a lack of clarity and lack of standards and lack of clear definitions, which then leads to issues like what Matthias mentioned at an earlier panel, where you have a patchwork of regulations and different labels that are not necessarily 100% consistent with each other. And the third thing is that we should not forget that the transition and sustainable investment is not immune, does not exist in a silo, in a vacuum. It is subject to the same macroeconomic challenges that we see overall in terms of, rising inflation, rising interest rates, geopolitical fragmentation, and so on and so forth. But to come back again to the original point around our role here, financial capital by itself cannot deliver an orderly transition. It is the cooperation between governments, companies, and the financial sector. It's like a team sport, but again, if I look across the room here, I think I am preaching to the converted, so we'll stop here.
Thank you. I think that's a good opportunity to bring Tomomitsu back in. Obviously, the EIB is a major financier of green projects. Could you tell us a bit about that and maybe list one or two compelling examples of the EIB's investment in green bonds?
Thank you so much. Actually, there are so many examples. As you said, EIB is one of the major financiers. And I would like to comment what Ferenc has just mentioned about the loans before moving on to the bonds. Because we have had some loans, actually 6 projects in 2020 and 2021, located in Hungary that had been allocated from our green and sustainability bonds. So there have been disbursements, actual flows of money to the real economy that have been allocated from our green and sustainability bonds. And one of these projects is actually with MVM, so it was a network upgrade. So now about some examples of recent examples, some recent innovation that the EIB has taken on the investment side of the green bond market. There has been recently, for the first time, the EIB has participated as a lead investor in a green bond issued by a French corporate, Valeo. The EIB has purchased 150 million euro of a 600 million transaction. And this was the debut green bond of Valeo. Another example is beyond the borders of the European Union. It is called the Global Green Bond Initiative. This is a fund that has a de-risking mechanism that is supported by a, I quote, European Fund for Sustainable Development plus guarantee. And it sees the participation of many development finance institutions where the European Investment Bank has a coordinating role. And this fund will invest in green bonds issued in emerging markets. So as you can see, Team Europe is acting beyond the borders of the EU, and where exactly the standards that you were mentioning, where there is the need for, let's say, some more clarity on the consistency within the EU standards, you can imagine when you go outside the borders of the EU that this need is even more important. So this will be part of this fund to work about this. And you were also mentioning education, Ferenc, and you as well, and I completely agree. And this market is also relatively new. The first green bond was in 2007, and was structured by the head of the sustainable finance team of the EIB, Aldo Romani. So I'm working in this team. So it's a very new market, and there's the need to build a pipeline for new green bond issuance, and this is why it is also a focus of the Global Green Bond Initiative, because in emerging and developing economies, this is even more needed. Great.
Thank you. I think we can talk all day about greening portfolios, but really, at the end of the day, this discussion also needs to green. We need to green the real economy. Really, that's what this is all about: decarbonizing the real economy. So I'd like to bring László in. Financing in Hungary, in Central and Eastern Europe, and generally in Europe, is still dominated by bank lending. So can you speak about your experience with bond issuance earlier this year and how this relates to MVM's sustainable transition?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to give you a context, so MVM is a fully state-owned company, and we have market leader or monopolistic positions at almost all of the natural gas and electricity value chain here in Hungary. So when we talk about transition and decarbonization, then transition of the Hungarian economy and especially the energy industry basically cannot be done without MVM Group. And this defines basically our strategy. And as you perfectly said, also in case of MVM, our financing is still mainly based on bank lending. But in 2021, we realized that basically we reached our limits with our banks. Or otherwise, they reached their limits towards us. So we experienced that we cannot increase further our credit limits because of lending limit issues. So we had to make the decision to go to the bond markets. So we obtained the credit ratings, and first in 2021 we issued foreign bond, then euro bond, and then this year we issued dollar bonds, and this was a green bond, first in our history, basically. And we consulted a lot with investment banks, other banks, and peers, and our conclusion was that as a utility company, against which the market expects really the decarbonization and the transition, basically we have to go to this direction to issue green bonds. So we set up a green financing framework in this May, in which we outlined the reporting, the way of reporting, the use of proceeds, and all these necessary requirements. This green financing framework was completed and prepared in line with all the relevant guidelines, EU taxonomy, and so on. And actually, it was quite a good experience, and it showed us that this is the way we should proceed. Because it was already mentioned, I think by David, that this transition, and especially in the energy industry, will require a huge capex. And basically, we expect that in the next 5, 10, 15 years, MVM Group will have the biggest capex program of its history, because we have to really spend a lot on the transition. You know, we have in our portfolio the last lignite-fired power plant, Mátra, and one of our key target is to reduce greenhouse gas emission and the intensity of greenhouse gas intensity of our power generation, which means that we will need to phase out Mátra power plant, and we will need to replace this capacity with other capacities with lower carbon emission. Of course, huge capex. On the other hand, it was already mentioned that the increase of the photovoltaic capacities is a big success story, absolutely agree. But we see that it will continue. And it is, on the other hand, a huge challenge for us because we operate the transmission system and we operate part of the power distribution system. And you know, the integration of the photovoltaic capacities into the grid is quite a big challenge, I would say. So it also requires development. So for all of this, we think that basically the green bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, this is the way to go. So this is how we see this in the future.
Right, thanks. I have a couple follow-up questions, but I also want to give Ferenc and Anastasia the opportunity to please also post questions or comment if you'd like. My question would be, if you could provide more insight on the green financing framework itself, which KPIs are used and how these are being monitored.
Million tons till 2030 of our energy or electricity production, the emission intensity by 40% till 2030. And in the green framework, basically, we included capex in relation to the development of the grid, so the transmission and the distribution system, and also the photovoltaic, the increase of the photovoltaic capacities. And basically all of the reporting, audit, and other principles are set up very clearly in this public document, in our green financing framework. And this year, we will make the first decision on the allocation of sources, also in line with the framework.
Great, thank you. Ferenc, I wonder if I can come to you now. Is Raiffeisen involved in active corporate stewardship practices as a shareholder? Are you engaged with investee companies in their transition plans, or if you want to comment on anything that László has laid out?
Yes. So in terms of the group strategy to facilitate here the green transition, I would say there are three main pillars. One pillar is through our balance sheet. of course, like financing as much green as possible for customers on the green transition in terms of green advisory, like how to do this, but also setting the best possible financing structure is the second. And the third is to shape the market, I would say, awareness as such, like there's a readiness for a constant strategy making and action plans on the overall market, which is consistent in terms of data requirements and the advisory. So this we also are facilitating. And in that sense, we are also concentrating on some partnerships. So we have signed, for instance, the UN agreement that we will have, I would say, in our loan book, 35% of green loans, and we have some till end of 25. We as well have some sector, I would say, exclusions, like we cannot finance anymore, and as well we shall get rid of those industries. And this is also clearly, I would say, communicated here. That's also important point. We internally have also our sustainability report, where we are also transparently communicating here with the market. I would mention we have also asset management companies having and managing couple of ESG funds, which is then again an investment opportunity on the other side. And here, in terms of the investee companies, I think what is very important, we are advising them to use the national bank opportunity here, and we simply are structuring loans and bonds here cheaper and also more easy to decide based on the capital need. We have some also internal fund transfer price benefits for the green loans, which is, I would say, a concise decision of us to support here the growth of the green loan book for the investee companies. We do, well, in Hungary we were the first to do green bond advisory, emitting, buying green bonds. We have our internal green bond framework, so this is also, I would say, very important. But this is not an easy road. So we see on the investee company side that the governance of this is not an easy one. So we need to concentrate on many things here. Like also their corporate board composition, for instance. In our board, there is a clear responsibility for the green agenda. There is a sustainability council, and we have the sustainability report. That's one topic, but also executive compensation and MBO targets, for instance, in the bank, but also in investee companies is, I would say, a big topic. So bribery and corruption to be avoided, political contributions and lobbying to be regulated. Many things shall as well be aligned to effectively use the green framework. So these are the major areas what we have in the governance and what we see as a necessity in investee companies to have a governance. No?
And just one follow-up to go off of László's comment that they've kind of reached the end of what can be accomplished by a bank lending. Would you agree with the assessment that there is a limitation in terms of what bank lending can do, and that there is a need to bolster capital markets and turn toward other kinds of instruments?
In terms of limitations of bank lending, I think, for instance, in Hungary, I think it's true for CEE, the banks are well capitalized and highly liquid. One limitation is that this green framework is support national bank and capital. There is, for instance, in Hungary, not necessarily in other countries, there are a lot more to do. The funding currently is more expensive, but still, I see rather this price issue of the funding than a limitation on the ability of the banking sector. So here, capital liquidity-wise is ample possibilities available. It's more the incentive side and the price of funding, and here I would urge, I would say, the funding institutions, and here also National Bank help, but other preferred fundings, also EIB and so, to provide more beneficial funding for this green transition. On the bond side, well, this can be, I would say, a good competition, whereas from a risk-return perspective, it's feasible. We organized a couple of green bonds in recent years, even for the real estate industry. So can be a good complementary, but I would not say that currently bank lending is limited. What is limited is more the beneficial funding and those capital incentives, as well as the previously mentioned other obstacles.
Right, thank you. Well, that's a perfect segue to Anastasia. Can you speak about any active stewardship practices of BlackRock, or more generally, if you can offer your perspective as an asset manager on the progress you're seeing with regard to GSS issuance, and maybe commenting on what László's laid out from the MVM experience?
I will start big picture first. What do we mean when we say stewardship? For us, it is about engaging with companies to promote, to encourage effective corporate governance and corporate practices that we think are essential for the long-term success of companies, and we do this through the engagement, that is the dialogue with companies, through our voting activity, but also engagement with broader stakeholders. And coming back to the point I made at the beginning, that what we do is based on research. We have done the research that shows an orderly transition will basically be better for everyone. It will foster a macroeconomic environment that we think is better for returns for our clients. And that is why we consider, for example, that companies could benefit from developing credible transition plans. And what do we mean when we say transition plans? We think this is a core aspect of corporate strategy that sets out targets and actions to meet those targets in terms of the green transition. And this is useful both internally and externally. Internally, we think that this process of transformation helps bring together business strategy and climate goals and CapEx, capital allocation decisions. And all of this, we think, helps company management assess the long-term opportunities of a company, but also the future competitiveness, like where am I going to stand as a business compared to my peers in 5, 10, 20 years from now. Externally, this type of plan is useful not just for shareholders, but also broader stakeholders to understand how a company plans to create value through this transformation. Now, companies are different depending on their sector, the region, the starting point. So we do expect that the content, how specific a transition plan is, will differ across companies. We also expect that the content will also depend on how essential the topic of climate change and climate risks are to the business model of a company. So then comes the question, how can we tell if a plan is robust? The things that we will look at will be, first of all, is it a core part of the company strategy, or is it let's call it a shiny brochure that sits somewhere on the side? The second thing that we will see is, does it do what it says on the tin? As in, does it set out the short, mid, long-term ambitions of the firm, the plans it wants to, the actions it plans to take? CapEx, the magic word for me, capital allocation, where is the money going to go to? So what activities? Then the third point is the plan honest with the challenges that the company will face as part of this transformation, and also the limitations of what it can do? And the fourth thing we heard, governance and oversight. Who is accountable not just to set this up, but also to see it through, to make sure that this transition does happen and it is a success? Now, do we see company progress? Most definitively, we do see company progress, and we think that the landscape has developed massively. I mean, there are different things we can say about how companies choose to finance themselves, and I think this is not just a company decision, but a broader financial framework. In terms of stewardship, what we have been very pleased to see, we have set, for example, a climate-focused universe. It is over 1,000 companies worldwide, and these companies together account for 90% of Scope 1 and 2 emissions that we as a firm own in terms of equities overall. And we have seen that the commitments, but also the reporting in terms of TCFD framework has increased drastically. Right now, about 80%, that's 80%, of these universe is actually reporting towards TCFD. It was less than 60% just a couple of years ago, so we definitely see progress.
Definitely seeing progress. Is there anything that you would like to see specific progress on, either on the corporate or the SSA side in terms of issuance?
It is the transformation. I mean, you know, it's one thing to set the targets, but another thing to see what is the business, what is the company actually doing to meet those targets, the CapEx, where is the money being spent on, how much does the business model need to change to be competitive in a low carbon environment. It's many different things.
Great. Well, that's a perfect opportunity for me to go back to László, as Anastasia laid out credible transition plans and how important they are. What are some of the lessons that you have learned that might be helpful or relevant to other energy companies as they consider how to finance and implement the sustainable transition?
Yeah, I think here in the region with all of the other utilities and energy companies, we are in the same shoe, basically. So it was perfectly mentioned that you need a credible transition strategy, transition plan, and if you set this up, you will need to focus a lot on the documentation, on the data, basically data collection. We all see the increasing reporting requirements, and for a big company like MVM Group with more than 100 subsidiaries, basically meeting these requirements and setting up the IT systems for the monitoring the data and collecting the data in an auditable way. This is I think a big challenge, and this you cannot start soon enough, I would say. This is our experience and our lesson, basically, and you know, with this whole transformation. We also had to realize that it needs a kind of mindset change for the management as well. And we, as MVM Group, just at the beginning of this procedure, we just started a transformation program with education, with the involvement of the different levels of the organization and also the subsidiaries. I think it's a long way, and then you need, as a senior management, a high level of commitment and enthusiasm, I would say, because it will need a lot of effort to transform a big organization in a sustainable way.
Great, thank you. Well, we've heard about a number of challenges, but I would like to shift now to maybe a more positive note, which is highlighting the pioneering and innovative initiatives from the MNB, and including incorporating sustainability into the central bank mandate, which is really quite progressive in this space. So, David, I'll come back to you. How has the MNB been taking a lead within the central bank community on sustainability, and if you can speak to some of the programs and initiatives?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, because maybe that's my opportunity to shine now, but so that's not my intention. I just want to start with one important thought that, yes, we do have a green mandate, which means that, I mean, next to our primary inflation, financial stability mandates, we also need to do something about environmental sustainability, and that's very important. It's absolutely, so how we look at this is absolutely vital to consider sustainability, risk sustainability issues nowadays. So you heard in the morning panels and the morning discussions of how much kind of like the energy sector or energy prices have been driving up inflation, for example, and what kind of vulnerabilities it means for this region, but for a Hungarian economy in particular. So it's absolutely a risk issue, a risk management issue to deal with sustainability. That's how we look at it now. We have done our numbers, we have done analysis, and I also want to highlight that by far the worst scenario for the Hungarian economy is that we are not transitioning. I'm talking about kind of like a 30-year horizon. when there is no transition, just kind of like we let climate change run wild and all the physical risks to materialize, it's by far the worst scenario for the Hungarian economy. A disorderly transition is a little bit better, but an orderly transition is the best in terms of welfare. So kind of counting in all the different costs and the benefits, kind of like the big picture is that yes, we should work towards it. And I'm seeing in this panel we have representatives from multilaterals, capital markets, banks, and I see that everyone is doing a lot, and that's a good sign, but I think we need to come to the mainstreaming, so how this can be scaled up. And that's, I think we are a little bit now not seeing a very positive picture that the scaling up, how this will take place. I mean, we have good drivers, but the scaling up is not happening yet, I would say. A bit of the justification of why are we dealing with this issue. We think it's a big risk, and it's also an opportunity for the Hungarian economy. So we have started working on this 5 years ago, so we come a long way. We basically have a green mandate, as I said, and two strategies, one on the monetary policy side and one on the financial supervision side. On the monetary policy side, of course, that is very much connected to the economic environment of what is the monetary policy. If monetary policy is restrictive, of course, kind of like the green elements in a monetary policy are also limited. So that should be understood in that way. There have been a number of successful initiatives, refinancing programs, asset purchase programs. We also helped a lot with the green bond market. Residential housing, etc. So we've done a lot on the monetary policy side. And we have done quite a lot on the financial supervision side. And I think by far the most important, maybe two things. One is that we really started taking climate risk environmental risk seriously and integrate it into the prudential supervision of the banks. Really set expectations. We set guidelines, expectations, supervisory expectations. And now, since from this year, we are actually in the reviews of the banks, we are looking at item by item whether these expectations are met. And I think this is very important because with this, I think we can elevate sustainability issues into kind of like boardrooms. We will see the results that there are changes in corporate governance. We see some financial products are being developed. So we really see that this is working. Of course, I mean, mainstreaming is yet, I think, a challenge. The other one, so that's on the part of risk management, and we try to also do with our tools, we try to also help developing the market. That can be also trivial things like data provision, provision of statistics, etc. But we also, for example, Ferenc, you mentioned that this capital incentive that we have in place, it's quite, I have 2 minutes left, sorry, I try to
it's okay, we can go a bit over. We can cut into the coffee break.
So we have this capital relief program for green assets that's quite progressive. Also, I mean, it may be a whole issue in itself of whether the capital regulation can be used for incentivizing the green transition. I don't want to go that much deep into it, but we're using this as a toolkit also to provide a little bit of the incentive for Hungarian banks to reduce cost of capital on certain green exposures. So that's two, so market development, and maybe the third, kind of like in a big bracket, example setting. We try to also, in our own operations, also do that kind of like carbon reduction programs, and we also offsetting our footprint that we cannot reduce, so that's on the operations side. And we try to be as transparent as possible. We issued TCFD report for the second time, a climate risk report, if someone hasn't heard about TCFD for the second time. This year, we are doing our own green finance report, and we try to also, to walk the talk, or is that an English expression? So try to set an example of how this can be done, and I think that's also very important. Sponsoring education, Ferenc, you mentioned education, capacity building, technical assistance. So we try to kind of approach it in an ecosystem way, which I really think is the most important, that everyone is really kind of trying to incorporate it incorporated sustainability into their business practices, and this is happening as we see in this panel. So I think we can be optimistic, but there is still a long way to go. 20 seconds.
That's great. Yeah, we're just going to go a little bit over. I hope it's okay if we cut into the coffee break, but I do want to have a chance for everyone to have some kind of concluding remarks very quickly. But first, I just want to say it's really laudable what the MNB is doing, and I think it's really important to see examples like this in the central banking world, which is quite conservative when it comes to issues of sustainability and decarbonization. And clearly the market response has been positive, as Ferenc mentioned. So with that, just very quickly, under a minute, if everyone could just say what the most important thing that they would like to see in ESG, in the ESG finance space, and maybe if we could end on a slightly optimistic note, that would be great. Tomomitsu, maybe I'll start with you.
Thank you. I would like to comment what my former colleague Tomasz Latzik in a previous panel, who is now at the Austrian Central Bank, he quoted Il gattopardo di Leopardi, di Tommaso di Lampedusa. So everything changes, so nothing changes. I would like to, I love Lampedusa, but I would like also to go back to the Cratylus, as this is kind of a Socratic dialogue, and I will finish shortly. Ta pantarei ka uden menei. Everything moves and nothing stays. I think that it can go in many directions. There are many risks. We heard about greenwashing risk, but there's also great opportunities. And you were mentioning education, and Ferenc had said, why are the benefits? There are many types of benefits, potentially. Some are some market. What about demand? We heard in the second session, a gentleman, Mr. Nali, I hope I'm not wrong in the pronunciation, from Neuberger, mentioning a lot of demand for such type of products. So if there's a lot of demand, what to do? Well, last Greek word, phronesis. There's need for wisdom applied to practical action with prudence. This means willingness and care. This means being accountable, this means being clear. On our side, for example, we have an audit by a supervised auditor with reasonable assurance. And there are many cases. AKK, who was talking earlier, has its framework. It is public. They have done transactions that are quite striking, like green samurai bonds. And I think that this is public information that can motivate new players to come to the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anastasia?
Okay, nothing as poetic as that. I want to just say something about policy and regulation, because, many people will say, oh, no, not more regulation. We do see policy as one of the three main drivers behind the transition, the other ones being technological innovation and consumer preferences. And these three drivers are mutually reinforcing. So you can see, for example, policy reducing the cost of renewable energy that then makes it preferable for consumers. So we really need to spend some time on this. And when we're looking at sustainability overall in the transition, we need to see the big picture and the whole puzzle. It is not just sustainable finance. I mean, we can all have disclosures and data and so on, but it's also industrial policy, because this is where the natural incentives for green investment will happen.
Great, thank you. László?
Yeah, so as representative of the real economy and the energy industry especially, the sustainability basically strives us to really do this transformation of our generation portfolio, the grids. So we expect that in 5-10 years, the generation portfolio will be with much less greenhouse gas emission. Our systems, grids will be more robust and will be able to integrate all of these renewable capacities. As I mentioned, this is a big modernization and transformation program, and this basically brings development, and this is the future, so it's fine.
Great, thank you. Everyone's staying optimistic so far. Ferenc, will we continue this?
So, as a bank, of course, we would like to see more preferential capital treatment for such financings and transformation. I would say on the one hand, this would be important. I would like to see also more regulation maybe on this education topic, potentially also mandatory transition plans for companies. We can go that far, helping here the green transition. And we are also optimistic this will go. I truly believe as well that in the long term for the Hungarian economy, the successful transition is key. And here the financial sector will play a key role. So,
Thank you. David, you have the last word?
Yeah, so try to just go back to my first thought about kind of like using the price signal in the market-based instruments. I'm very much in favor of carbon taxing, carbon pricing. In some way, it's a very difficult topic, of course. I mean, it's no wonder that this is not kind of like a universal, there's no universal carbon price yet, effectively high carbon price yet. But I think it's absolutely essential that we work towards that goal, that these externalities which come from emissions are somehow internalized. I think carbon pricing can do that, and then it probably will solve a lot of the issues that we're facing, cost issues about green technologies, etc., etc. So somehow kind of like strengthening that, kind of like the price signal which comes from, you know, like polluting activities with high emissions. I think that's also what the Hungarian economy would need. There are certain different paths to that, and there are other objectives. But in some way, I think we should strengthen that and work towards that make it to our benefit. So that I would like to add here.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much to our panelists. It's fantastic to have such voices from different representative backgrounds here on this panel, and it's important to bring together the real economy, finance, and policy making together in these conversations. So thank you very much.